Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And we're on the third and final Dark Knight movie. The Dark Knight Rises from 2012.
Yes.
We're 8 years on from the previous film, Dark Knight. After Harvey Dent's death and the lie that Gary Oldman and Batman keep to themselves, Commissioner Gordon and Batman keep to themselves, the Dent laws, or the Dent Act, has been put into place. Police have been given sweeping new powers to put prisoners away, and organised crime is pretty much gone from Gotham. It's peacetime. Everything's alright. And Batman has disappeared. He's not been seen since the night that Harvey Dent died. Neither has Bruce Wayne, really. He's become a recluse. He's Howard Hughesing it up in his house. But
Howard Hughesing it up.
But events conspire to bring him back. There's a huge guy on the loose called Bane, played by Tom Hardy. We can play our game of Spot the American in this again, because some cast members have been added, and a couple are American, but a couple are also, again, from this side of the pond. And this is the film that made me believe that Tom Hardy was about 6'4". I mean, it was only a couple of years ago you told me he's like 5'7" or something. Maybe not quite that short.
Or maybe not quite that short, but I
5'8"
saw. I actually saw him at Cineworld. He was there for the premiere of
Peaky Blinders.
No, it was the film that he did about driving all night.
Locke. They did a premiere for that, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
Oh, right. Well, it was by Stephen Knight. So.
And actually, the pictures of him at the premiere are, as you go up the escalator in Cineworld, you can see him there.
Yeah.
So, and he was very, he was very short. I'm very short, and I thought he was very short.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, I had no idea. I mean, I had seen him in things before this. Bronson was before this, I think. But again, he's physically imposing in that, and there's a lot of shooting him from below makes him look bigger.
Yes.
That's happening a lot with Bane here.
Yes.
And you very, very seldom get a full body shot of him, or a kind of long enough take to get a real sense of his size. So there's camera trickery being employed, clever camera angles. He looks massive, and he's physically
brilliant.
imposing. And the thing about Bane, I was always... Isn't Bane supposed to be the better of Batman, the superior of Batman in every possible way? He's smarter, he's stronger. He's the guy who, in one of the comics and in this film, breaks the Bat, right? He breaks his back and beats him. And that's kind of what's supposed to be, I always thought, so kind of intimidating about him. And he is, but the twist here sort of destroys that, doesn't it? Because...
Yes, I mean, this is my favorite of all of these films, and the only one that I was really, engaged with throughout. A lot of it does have to do with how wonderful I think Tom Hardy is as Bane. But actually, that's not true. I mean, I think the film is populated with great actors, actually, from really small parts. I recognize William Devane, Ben Mendelsohn is in it. I mean,
Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Matthew
Modine, yes. Also, what's his name? The Irish actor returns. Yeah, he's been in all three of them.
Cillian Murphy.
Who's wonderful to see. Also, what's his name? Who was in Queer as Folk, and then also latterly in Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I don't know his name, but
I love him.
He's the guy right at the start, the CIA guy.
That's right,
yeah.
Right? I mean, these are tiny roles played by tremendous actors, right? Who clearly all want to work with Nolan. So I think it's a film that is incredibly well cast.
Aidan Gillen.
Aidan Gillen, fabulous. I loved watching. Anne Hathaway is one of those people who, I think she's a real movie star. She's so charismatic and she's often brilliant, but she always has moments where it just goes off, right? Where you just think it's the wrong choice, right?
Well, how do you mean? In here, in this film?
Yes.
Okay.
She always does that. But what I'm trying to say the opposite. I'm trying to say what a pleasure it is to watch her.
Oh, right.
Right. Kind of even, if she occasionally...
Yeah,
I think the
I wonder what you think those wrong choices are here, though.
That moment where she talks to Batman and she gets all sentimental and teary-eyed.
Where she says, you don't owe these people anymore, you've given them enough.
She begins to just well up and tear up, and she's telegraphing you know, every emotion at like 100 miles an hour. Whereas actually, you can't imagine Selina Kyle doing that. She'd be ironic and, yeah, cool. Like she's been throughout the rest of the film, right? You know, and kind of have attitude. So I think, whereas, you know, I mean, she's a very facile actress, so she can, you know, shift from one emotion to the other. But her tendency is always to sentimentalize, right? And I think it's kind of off.
Okay, that's not what I thought about that moment, I must say. I mean, that moment to me spoke of... Throughout this film, Selina Kyle, Catwoman, has a connection to the lower class in the city. She's part of it, and she's part of the criminal class. I mean, it's petty criminality. She's not an organised criminal. But, you know, when she gets to know Bruce Wayne through stealing his stuff initially, you know, he's obviously a super billionaire, and she's always making comments about how his half lives, and when he loses everything, he gets to keep his house, and she says, even the rich don't go poor like the rest of us.
Sure.
And there's this thing, there's something happening in that part when, you know, by this point she knows he's Batman and all the rest of it, and he's come back, and she's saying, you know, you give me your bat bike, I'll do the thing he said, I'll blow up the tunnel, and then I'm leaving, I'm gone, and you should too. And she has no sentimentality for this place, and you know, it's not just... She does have that ironic coolness going on in so much of the film, but there is something beneath it. I mean, Batman's constantly telling her, there's more to you than this.
I think a less sentimental actress or a better director would have conveyed her emotion without her going so full on about it. And I think it's her weakness as an actress.
I didn't feel it was full on, but actually I'm not normally one who defends Anne Hathaway, and I think this is by far the best performance I think I've seen her give.
It's a very enjoyable performance, and she looks fantastic. And actually, and when she's being ironic and cool and, you know, in action, she's very good.
I love how she moves in this. There's a point right at the start when she's playing the maid, and Bruce Wayne discovers her, and she's trying to be, you know, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be here. And then he says, no, you've broken into my safe, it's uncrackable. And she... her shoulders move and her head moves and her eyes change. She goes, no one told me it was uncrackable. You know, and she turns into the seductive. And I was thinking about the Batman Returns Michelle Pfeiffer version.
Oh, yes.
You know, where I said she moves incredibly.
And Michelle Pfeiffer is the performance of this role, frankly.
But, you know, we were talking about Michelle Pfeiffer in relation to the showiness of the casting of those earlier films that you felt these films lack. And, you know, showy casting is sort of one thing, neither here nor there. It's about performance, and her performance here is in movement, so it's in the way that she transforms from playing the part into being who Catwoman really is. And then she kicks his cane away, and she does this move. She slides on her heels and puts her hands on her hips, and then jumps up to the window, and like it's timed perfectly, and it's precise. And she is in control and stylish.
Well, I don't want to overdo it, because the thing is, I really like her, and I agree with you. Yeah, it's kind of, you know, she's very enjoyable to watch, and it's actually, you know, this is an all-star film that is not publicized as such, and it's a pleasure to watch the stars. But I actually disagree with aspects of what you're saying, because, for example, my first thought when I saw her as the maid, where she was wearing those 8-inch platform heels, right? And you realize she doesn't know how to walk in them. Like, she, you know, actually her movement, as she was going to say, was very clumsy, right? So, but I agree with what you're saying. Later on, she's very elegant in her movements and so on. But the thing is that the you know, there are these little spots where you're aware, that the editors are betraying her. Like, you know, you could have cut that moment, or you could have filmed it better. It's just a moment of awkwardness, right? And certainly, I think, you know, that initial parting with Batman, where, you know, I think it's like overdone. I think it's over sentimentalized, and you could have, you know, done the feeling much more elegantly, and also much more in keeping with a character who's meant to be somebody who survived the gutters of Gotham. You know, I think it's too easy a giveaway and too full on and so on. So I think kind of, you know, there are those moments. Think, for example, in contrast, you know, to Bane, right? You know, and his parting with the Cotillard character, right? You know, it's just a tear, and you see it through the corner of the eye, and yet all the feeling is evoked, right?
I actually didn't feel much feeling with. I saw his tear. I didn't feel it. Maybe I need people to shout at me.
Yes, maybe you do.
But that point that we're talking about, where Anne Hathaway's on the bike, that is an emotional moment, because that's the first moment in the film, I think, that you really get the sense that he might die, because that's when he says, "I haven't given them everything, not yet," and that's when you start to think, are they going to kill Batman? And the film kind of leads you up to that, and they're constantly talking about the autopilot on his plane not working, which means that when it gets to the point where he's got the bomb, he has to fly it out there, and it looks like he kills himself, and then at the end it gives you that moment of no, he hasn't. And you can talk all you like about, is it like the end of Inception where you don't know, is it a dream that Alfred sees him?
The film doesn't signal that. The film signals clearly that.
People love to think about that though. People did question that. They're like, oh, is it meant to be?
Yeah, well,
you can make it.
You could also say, well, it's happening in another dimension. I mean, you could make anything up that you want, but in the terms of the film, he survives, and and so on.
Makes a life with
Selina Kyle, and Alfred is pleased.
Yeah. So, but that point is an emotional point, and I think it's. I mean, I didn't feel. I'd have to go back and watch it again. I didn't feel that Anne Hathaway was mugging it or overdoing it or whatever.
No.
But,
well. You see, I think you're misinterpreting me, because I think for like 19...
No, I'm only talking about that moment.
Oh, I think that moment is over.
I'm only talking about that moment, so I'd have to go back and watch it again. I didn't feel it, basically, from her in that moment. Maybe we just were on different
reacting differently, yeah.
Let's...
Yes, let's be more systematic, because actually this is the one film of these that... I mean, I don't think it's perfect still, but that I unreservedly like, that I was with it, for all of the film, actually, that I enjoyed it, and that I thought was inventive. I thought the opening sequence was wonderful. It was like a Mission Impossible kind of, sequence, and very exciting to see, and kind of completely energized by the Bane character, actually, who just from the beginning, the way he talks and the way he moves, and, it's completely entrancing, that character.
And it's as original a version of that character as Heath Ledger's Joker was, I think.
I think so.
People were looking for, what's the version going to be?
Well, I mean, my view really is that, in terms of these, charismatic performances, yesterday's film, the Heath Ledger film, Heath Ledger's was the only one, really, whereas actually this film is peopled by a whole series of performances like that. Who was the young girl in Killer Joe?
Juno Temple.
Yeah, because she plays Selina Kyle's sidekick here, right? And it's just a tiny role, right? But even in those tiny roles, people like that really bring something.
Yeah.
And the film is full of, star casting in all of these tiny roles, and it pays off. Yeah, you appreciate them. They bring something to the party.
And it's not just the casting, it's also the setting up of the characters. The film has a wider scope of characters than the previous two have, and you get more of a sense of how people in this city live.
Yes, and the set pieces are better. I think it's got really memorable ones. And this is not the action, because I still have, the same problems with the filming of the action as I've had for the other two. But I'm talking more of the conceptualization of the set pieces, right? So, the first one, which is very Mission Impossible, and then the one of getting out of the prison. So I really, I thought those things were like very imaginative.
It's such a great idea, although the climb itself, actually, I still don't buy. I didn't buy it then, and I don't buy it now, because...
Well, you're not showing it very well.
You're not showing it very well. And the final jump that everyone misses is an easy jump, right? People can make it from a standing start, and there's room for a run-up. Like, it's not like just on a practical level, I don't buy it. I go, try harder.
Also, there isn't the logic. If a 12-year-old girl could do it, why can't a much taller adult do it?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are logical kind of inconsistencies, and there are thematic elements that are not very well tied together or worked through in this film. It feels like a hodgepodge of ideas. So on the one hand, the film is clearly connecting with the events in Wall Street in 2008. Yeah, there's a whole sector of the film where that gets reflected.
And there's a whole theme under it as well of inequality.
There's a whole theme of inequality, but very, very poorly thought through. So, it is drawing on all of these elements of the French Revolution and Robespierre and the kangaroo courts and, the rich kind of being punished. And, but actually, you think for most of the film, I thought, again, that there are these like almost fascist tendencies that the film, wittingly or unwittingly, is kind of conveying. Because, if you think of Bane as the poor person born in the gutter who hasn't seen daylight in 30 years and who's a real underclass person, and you're still meant to side with, billionaire Bruce Wayne, there's something just off about that, right? Like,
Bane is definitely put forward as he has the shape of a revolutionary figure, standing on top of the cop car, shooting down the prison walls, getting the prisoners out, saying, "This is your city, you live how you like."
I know, but he's represented as conveying a reign of terror.
Exactly.
So again, it's like this underclass person and so on is bad. He brings chaos and terror and death and disaster.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a very weird thing. And then, of course, the film recovers it a little bit, by spoilers, if there's still anyone, listening who will find this a spoiler. But when the film shifts the onus from her to Marion Cotillard...
From him to Marion
Cotillard, all of that changes. Because, she is the daughter of Ra's al Ghul. In some ways, she is the daughter of power as well as Bruce Wayne is. So the film makes kind of like an interesting homology there between Bruce Wayne, Selina Kyle, and the Marion Cotillard character and Bane. One high, one low. To be Ra's al Ghul's daughter is somebody.
Kind of. But the film says this. He became someone, but he was a mercenary. But
then he became Ra's al Ghul.
But the thing about Bane is, like I said at the start about the twist being that this woman is not whatever her name was. She's Talia al Ghul, and she is a real mastermind. It means that the story that you've been told the whole way through about this child that was born in prison, Ra's al Ghul's child, born in prison and climbed out, is her. It's not Bane. You actually then don't really get any background for Bane. What you get is Bane was obviously older than her, because when you do see him demasked in a flashback briefly in that prison, and he's Tom Hardy.
Yeah, but he's a very young-looking Tom Hardy.
But he's, 20-something, right? He's older than she is. She's a tiny little kid. So he, for whatever reason, became her protector and then was beaten to fuck. You don't really know why. There's just a brawl, which is when she escapes. And when she comes back, he's been disfigured, and that's why he's got the mask. But where he comes from, you don't know if he was born there. He never climbed out. That's not his story. He's really no one. And that's what I was saying earlier about the twist sort of devaluing everything I thought I knew about Bane, because I was bringing that to the film. Like, this is the ultimate villain. This is the one who's supposed to have beaten the Bat. And he does, but then you're left with no actual reason of why is he so great? How did he beat the Bat? How does he know who he is? Why is he so strong? That's actually completely blank after this is over, because it wasn't him. Right? He is second in command.
Well, the film is full of like inconsistencies like that, or things that don't feel
complete. And I think this is one of the reasons that when it came out, people, I think, it still made $1 billion, but I think people were disappointed, and I think some people felt like Christopher Nolan was phoning it in.
Oh, well, how could you? I think it's much better than any of the others.
I think in terms of the story, because that's what people get attached to ultimately, and there are, I think, more holes and inconsistencies in this than there are in the previous two films, and that's, I think, and there was a thing about it has the thing about the bomb, which I think a lot of people commented on as being like in the 60s film, when he's literally running around with a big circular bomb and he says, some days you can't get rid of a bomb. And then at the end of this theoretically serious film with a seriousness of purpose and theme, it ends with Batman running around the city with a bomb.
Well, I mean, first let's be clear. This whole thing about a seriousness of purpose and a theme, I think watching all of these three films in a row recently, I mean, that sunk that idea because, I think if that's what you're positing this film as, it sinks. It doesn't hold up. Kind of. I don't think it's a serious film about serious ideas. I think it's one that has like ambitions, but actually it doesn't match its ambitions. If you think through the film of injustice or inequality in this film, it just doesn't hold up. I mean,
well, it's not so much that it doesn't hold up, but what you're saying about the way these ideas come across as fascist, has some truth to it. Maybe you actually end up going, Batman just kind of is a fascist. I mean, isn't this why Alan Moore wrote Watchmen? Like these kind of people who put on masks and run around claiming that they're above the law and they know what's best for us. These are psychopaths, and if were this real life, these would be the problem. And the question: who watches the Watchmen? Who's in charge of Batman? Only himself. And ultimately, these characters are kind of fascist. People have said the same about Superman as well.
Yeah, but I think okay. So, let's leave that open, possibly. But certainly, if Nolan is as great as a film artist as people claim him to be, he would have resolved a lot of these problems in these iterations, and he hasn't.
Yeah, well, I think they're kind of not there to be resolved. Like, they're there to basically either be indulged in or ignored.
Well, okay.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, like I think Tim Burton's Batman's ignored them.
Well, I don't actually. I think the thing, to me, Tim Burton's Batman holds up to much greater scrutiny, than these films. Yes. So I think it's, and it does so in its bones. I mean, just kind of like the set design alone in Tim Burton's Batman. It kind of, it's something that it's not realistic. It's dreamlike. It's gothic. It's, half last century, half next. Yeah, it's.
So we're not talking about the set design. We're talking about ideologically.
Well, I'm saying kind of ideologically, Tim Burton's Batman doesn't feel fascist to me, and this.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
That's what I say. That's what I mean when I say this idea that actually maybe this is fundamentally fascist can either be indulged in or ignored. Maybe it can't be fixed. So in Tim Burton's, maybe it is just ignored.
Well,
maybe it's just glossed over.
Maybe.
And because it's so much more, those are more fun films.
Maybe, but I still think that, in this iteration, in this story, kind of things could have been better worked through so that it leaves less room for doubt as to what the film is doing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, these kangaroo courts that really evoke the French Revolution, and focus only on the reign of terror, and not on the fraternité, égalité, liberté that it also brought about. Yeah, there's an accent there, which is, to me, a problematic one.
Well, you do have the underground meetings of the cops who still keep the fight up. Actually, it's a meeting that I think is evocative of the kitchen meeting in the second film, which, the Joker interrupts, the mob meeting. Now it's the police who've been driven underground.
I know, but it's still the police, it's not the people, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So, and in the meantime, the period which is supposed to have been very good is also shown to be one in which people have been arrested without warrant and kept in jail for 8 years without a hearing.
Yes.
Right? So that is also seen as kind of, very problematic. So, I think it's a very confused film. I think those ideas are now worked out kind of well.
I do agree. I was unfair to the second film when I said, that one's not about the battle for the soul of Gotham, that the trilogy is about, when I said the first and last are really about that because they're about the League of Shadows and Ra's al Ghul. Whereas the second one actually is full of that. As we said, we were talking about Harvey Dent is the symbol of the soul of Gotham in that film, and it's the fight for him that is between Batman and the Joker. So actually that film is full of it. Here, again, it's full of it, and I think you feel it more through the people, through the reign of terror that the criminals bring, but then it actually is kind of limited. Like ultimately the city goes through this kind of torture, but to what end is not entirely clear.
I mean, I think that with all of these films, and it's something I think we might have spoken about it before where I was seeing this Super Bowl, performance of, I think it might have been Beyonce.
I think you've mentioned it, yeah.
Yeah, and you get these dance formations. It feels like an army that comes out, and all the movements are mechanical, and and so on. It feels really fascistic, actually. And I take that as almost like a characteristic of this type of film. There is something wrong when you need formations of people in masses. You need to destroy football stadiums with hundreds of thousands of people in it. You have Batman going through Gotham skyline, and it doesn't matter that he destroys a building, like nobody gets hurt. Yeah, but there's nobody blah. Even when the atomic bomb gets detonated. I was thinking of Nikki. The poor fishes, right? And and surely there must be like it's an environmental disaster. There must have been like sailing boats or fishing boats or people died and suffered. And the film glosses over all of that, right? It doesn't matter, right? And I think there's just something wrong with that kind of wanton mass destruction in which nobody suffers. And I also thought that, at the end of the film where they're unveiling the statue, I mean, this is a city that must be like Beirut is today, right? I mean, I think the last thing on anyone's mind is to have a ceremony with a statue. I mean, I know that I'm focusing on, I mean, the film is not meant to be realistic on that level. And in some ways, it's wrong to look at it, on that level. But I think that there's no payoff to mass destruction, in terms of suffering, of real loss, or so I think to me this is a fault in the film, because I mean the only time that I felt emotion, that I felt moved by anything that was happening, you can move an audience through in many ways, right? You can move them through injustice, the recognition of injustice. You can move them through suffering, none of that is moving in any of this. I mean, the only moment that I felt anything was, in that evocation of love between Bane and the Cotillard character.
Really?
Yes.
Man, I didn't feel that. I mean, like that point of revelation, raises all these questions about who the villain is supposed to be, and why was I worried about this Bane guy if he's just the lackey kind of thing. And it's also a long kind of drawn out bit of monologue that she has to explain, there's a bit of exposition there. So, maybe I get distracted by that, I don't feel it, but maybe I just wouldn't feel it anyway. Like I think it's kind of, I just think it's kind of silly.
Okay.
Well, maybe if I get moved by things, maybe I got moved when he said, I haven't given them everything, I haven't, not yet, not everything, not yet. I felt something when he gives Gordon the flare and lights up the flaming symbol on the bridge, and everyone knows that he's back. That has, because ultimately the kind of central thing going on in this entire film is about rising. Dark Knight Rises, and when they climb, when people try and climb up the prison to get out, they all chant "Rise, rise," except not in English.
Yes.
So, and
there's a lot of rising and falling in the film. It's true.
And it goes back to the first film when Thomas Wayne, his dad, says, "Why do we fall? So we can get back up again." Which the film plays a little bit of. So it kind of ties in, and I guess that stuff feels earned. Unless you disagree that it's not earned.
No.
I mean, maybe you don't. Maybe it's kind of phony.
No, well, I mean, I saw all of those things, and I knew that they were meant to have a response. I just didn't respond to it.
Yeah.
But I was thinking the larger aspects, right? For me, one of the things about Batman, essential to Batman, is his physical abilities. What he can do with his body, right? And kind of in the comic books is, he's learned every fighting system that there is, jiu-jitsu and karate, and he's someone who can do amazing things with their body. And then the other thing that's constantly highlighted is his intelligence, right? You know, he is like a master detective. He knows all of these things. He thinks in ways that ordinary people don't because, you know, he's so highly intelligent. And actually, those are the two things that you do not see in this film, right? So you know, the other aspects, which are Bruce Wayne's wealth and that he can buy technology and all of that stuff, fine. But, you know, so for example, you see that in Iron Man as well, right? He's, you know, super rich and has all this technology, but he's also super smart. And actually, when he doesn't have the technology, he can build it, or, whereas you never get that sense that Bruce Wayne,
is outthinking someone.
Exactly, right? And actually, I also think it's in keeping with this, you know, valorization of dumbness in American culture over the last 30, 40 years, and the suspicion of intelligence and culture and learning, right? Because that is central to the reason why Batman is Batman. He can outsmart you, right? And actually, he can outsmart you in a fight, right? So, and this manifests itself in the film in various ways. I hate the costume, right? And part of the reason why I hate the costume is because it feels like armor, right? It doesn't allow you to see the body in movement. Now, you know, kind of, you can get an audience to buy a lot. You could have had something that allowed you to see the body in movement, but you could also say it's the super technology that deflects bullets. I mean, you don't need to have it as an armor. And actually, it being an armor means something, you know, in itself. It's a protective thing rather than an outward thing. So I hate the outfit, and I think it also goes contrary to one's expectations of Batman, which is to see physical grace and agility, and you know, and to see it, right, where the that armored body prevents you from doing it. So I hate the design of all of that. I also hate the design of the Batmobile and all of that stuff. I think it feels military, right?
That's the idea. I'm not saying you're wrong, but the idea is that it is developed for the military that he then uses. So, like, it's given context within the film, but you may say, well, it's just wrong to conceptualize it that way to begin with.
Well, no, but you could also conceptualize it that way and then not have the Batmobile look like a tank. I mean, you know, in other iterations of Batman, you know, it's still like a lot of this technology is developed, you know, for the military or whatever, but actually it doesn't mean that you need to put it in a tank. I mean, you could have put it in a sleek Lamborghini or something and, you know, have the same technology operate in it and have the car do the same thing, right? The only bit of that I liked was the motorcycle, that reworked itself, that put itself back together. I thought that was a neat kind of physical a special effect,
I must say, it feels like the objection to the tumbler, the car, and to the suit, and I'm not saying you're wrong to object to them in the way that you are, but they do actually feel like fundamental objections to the way the films are working. Like, they are working in a mode which allows this stuff to be explained more plausibly or realistically rather than explaining it away as this is the Batman thing that's enjoyable and this is a vague idea of how he got it.
Well, no, I think you could do both. But you're right in that this is a larger problem with the film, because I think militarizing the costume and the Batmobile and all of these iconic things that you associate with the Batman and which had heretofore not been militarized, is in keeping with, you know, the film's, you know, I'm sure that Christopher Nolan's a very progressive person and so on, and I'm not sure how they've thought this through. You know, but there are certain things in the film that kind of really evoke a kind of a fascist aesthetic. And the militarizing of all of that is part of the problem. Yeah.
Okay. And the idea that, you know, a bunch of lefties come in and destroy the stock market and then rule, as you say, a reign of terror. And it's like, we need the king of billionaires to come back and save us.
It's a problem. So, but let's focus on the good things. So it's very entertaining, and also I think the lighting sometimes has, you know, I don't know what this was shot on, you know, but the image,
a lot of it 70mm IMAX,
okay,
and the rest of it I think will have just been 70mm regular or maybe 35.
it looks gorgeous. Like the film, has a real depth and texture, and it, kind of it captures the light beautifully. So that I thought was like a great pleasure to watch, and I did think, that the framing and the composition and so on were to me more interesting than they had been in the previous two films.
Which is interesting considering that this is a criticism that I made of the Dark Knight's compositions is that maybe they were composed for IMAX and they look their best in full IMAX, and when cropped down, they don't look so good. A lot more of this has been shot and composed for full frame IMAX than was in the Dark Knight.
Right.
Much more. I mean, you can tell again, we saw this on IMAX digital, not full IMAX, but you can tell from the crispness and sharpness of the image when it's IMAX and when it's not. And there's also a slight change in aspect ratio, but not very much because it is a widescreen screen we're looking at. But I mean, you can tell. So I think you maybe would expect that problem more here.
Yes, and
with the cropping.
And I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, I'm just telling you my feeling on it.
Yeah.
Is that it seemed to me more visually interesting.
There's a more interesting shot selection, but I think there are also more interesting setups to take advantage of.
Oh, yes.
I think that's one of the things, like the football player running across the field as the field disintegrates behind him.
Okay, but
I don't think there's anything quite that novel in the previous film.
True. Whereas other things, for example, if you look at the scenes in Selena Kyle's apartment, right, you think, what amateur shot that? Right? Yeah. So, and that could be that the frame is cut and, that we're only seeing half of it.
Not in there. That wouldn't be IMAX.
Well, yeah.
No, I mean, I'm telling you.
Okay.
IMAX is there too. The thing about IMAX is you can't film dialogue on it because the cameras are prohibitively loud. So they're used for spectacle, the big action scenes, the establishing shots, things like that. Once you get people in dialogue, seldom is it IMAX because you can't use it for that.
I think those scenes are shot very unexcitingly.
Yeah. I said in a previous podcast, maybe the Batman Begins one, that I felt over time Christopher Nolan's action direction has become more refined. And I think this film demonstrates it, although interestingly, I don't think Interstellar demonstrates it, which was 2 years later. The fight between Matt Damon and Matthew McConaughey we talked about, we weren't impressed with at all. One of the criticisms I had of that was saying, remember the fight in Game of Thrones?
Yes.
That's so brutal. This film has some feeling of brutality to it when it comes to Bane versus Batman, in those two scenes where they fist fight. But
actually, that's such an interesting comparison, the Game of Thrones one, right? Because with the Game of Thrones, you're emotionally involved and you're surprised, right? And you're seeing it I'm seeing it on a small screen, and yet the action affects you.
Did you not feel affected by the action here?
No.
Even that central scene where they fight in the sewers.
No, I never felt that any of them were in real danger, and also, like I said, all of that is being conveyed through the sound effects, right?
Yes.
And I think it's just not good enough.
It's a lot of it through the sound effects, but in that scene in the sewers, it is also through that framing, it's through that composition, that camera placement of below Bane, and placing him in the centre of that room and in charge of everything, and the idea that he is monologuing while performing this. I mean, the way that fight takes place, Batman is going at him and not laying a finger on him, really. He smacks him in the face, no response, and Bane can stand there, take it, monologue, and then snatch him out of the darkness.
It's very entertaining, but I didn't find it exciting or thrilling, or I didn't pull back, or it didn't affect me. So
it affected me. That's where you go. This is the guy who beats Batman. This is where he's broken. There's nothing this guy can do to beat him. He has been finished here.
I was thinking, his armor is protecting him.
Okay, but then he does break his back, so
you get a crack. But the armor could protect him.
I mean,
in fact, it does.
Was it not clear to you though that Batman had met his match here?
Oh yes, no, he'd met his match, but my thing is that if you watch some parkour in District 13 or something, you really feel these bodies in danger, right? I mean, after all, it's just a body, it's just flesh and blood that you're carrying around with you. We're very vulnerable, right? So kind of part of a fight scene is actually putting your body in danger. How can your body be in danger when it's encased in a tank?
There's an element of that, that's true. But then, his body can be in danger when Bane starts bashing his helmet in the head so hard that it breaks.
Well, that's true. So it's kind of degrees of all of that stuff, right? I mean, I think a more exciting director or something, or a better concept, again, things that you often see in comic books is, Batman somehow figures out, the way into Bane's weakness or something is through the gadget in his nose, which, happens at the end. But again, that's not filmed very excitingly, right? It's almost like, you don't see Batman.
Well, that is totally through the sound effect. When it breaks, you hear it break and you hear it go tss, and you realise he's made...
Yeah, in a better film, Batman would have figured that out and would have, that would be Bane's kryptonite and, he would have figured it out somehow, right? Whereas,
Well, I think this goes back to... this certainly goes back to what you're saying about his intelligence, and you don't see his intelligence come through in this, and, this essentially you go back to him not really being a detective in this very much. The conceptualization of Batman here, and what makes him, I guess, is about spirit and soul. Like, that's where the film is concentrating. He has the spirit to get back to Gotham, to climb out of that hole, to re-engage his fear. The guy explains to him.
But beyond. I mean, he's also been depressed for 8 years. That's how the whole of the film begins, really. So he's not somebody who picks himself up very quickly.
No, but he does eventually.
Well,
But
Alfred says, you were gone for 7 years and now you've been gone for another 8. So...
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, that is the conception here. Like, if you're saying, well, here's the problem, this is why he's not Batman, like, this is at least what the film is trying to give you, that it's about his bounce back ability.
Yes.
Like, that is this version of Batman, and, I kind of buy it. Like,
well, it's taken him a lot of years to bounce back.
Yeah.
I have a renewed appreciation of Michael Caine after watching this film. Because,
oh, really?
Yes, because I noticed how he is given all of the building blocks of the story. He does what supporting actors often do, which is, the hero acts, and then, the supporting actors fill in the blanks. Oh, yes, I went to the... it's because you went to the shopping center at 8 o'clock that the bomb was put at 2 o'clock in this... So they tell you all of the background story that enables the hero to act. And actually, Alfred is given masses of exposition, to recount. And it takes a great actor like Michael Caine to make all of those reams of exposition even vaguely human or much less interesting.
He is given a lot, and he's actually very sympathetic, and he cries. We were saying before about people crying non-stop, Matthew McConaughey crying non-stop, and you're like, ugh, crying. Michael Caine's thing about crying about, you fight the tears, whatever. But, like, that's... he does that here. He fights the tears, but the tears come, and that's what's effective. He wants to not cry, but he does.
Anyway, he's very good.
Because he's lost 3 Waynes.
Yeah, well...
You trusted me, and I couldn't keep your boy safe. You didn't like that bit?
No, so you're really, drawn to the cheap sentiment.
I like when men cry.
Well, I like when men cry. But I also
like... Not recently, you haven't.
Well, I want those tears to be better earned.
You don't think so? We've had 3 films of him looking after Bruce Wayne and he's fucked it up, and no wonder he cries.
Yeah, but you don't know anything about him, really. I mean, I noticed that there's a television series now about him. But these films, Alfred's only function is, to serve Batman, right? You don't know anything about him, or, his wishes, his wants, his desires. I mean, actually, I think the comic book fleshes, things out over the years. But
their relationship here is clearly deeper than that, though. They're together. They're a partnership. I mean, he is an employee.
No, but I'm not just talking about that. I'm saying his only function. He has no independent agency. You don't know what his wants or wishes or desires are. So it's not a question of whether he loves Bruce Wayne or not. Of course he does, right? You're told he does. I heard you from your first cry or whatever. We're told that, yeah. But that he's got no independent existence beyond that.
Well, he gets a holiday every year. We see that here. He goes to that restaurant in Italy.
We know that.
We know that. You know?
And we know that only so that he can meet Bruce Wayne at the end.
But isn't it nice that he reconnects with Bruce, even if it is just with a nod, he reconnects with Bruce as an equal, not as an employee, because Bruce is officially dead now. And so they are friends now and nothing less
Well,
than
it's more than that. It's meant to be a moment of fatherliness, right? You know, I'm glad my boy's okay and safe. You know, that's what it's meant to be. So, that's what it's meant to be. That's not what I felt.
No. You didn't feel anything.
Anyway, Mixed Bag. It's the one that I found the most entertaining of all three of them.
By a long way.
Yes. And you've just heard all of the other problems that we have with it. Which actually I didn't expect there to be so many. I thought, you know, that I would be agreeing with you about most of the things that, you know, I liked. And then we would pick on a few problems. And actually somehow what the conversation turned is, you know, we've been much more focused on all the problems that each of us individually and together, the ones we disagree on and the ones that we agree on. You know, it's kind of much more than I expected, actually.
The ultimate problem that I have with the film is that my problems with it are so minor. And actually, it fails to make me think about bigger ideas. I see, you know, the kind of construction of Bane as a kind of version of a left-wing revolutionary. I mean, left-wing might be too far, but a revolutionary figure. But it doesn't inspire me to think much more. I see the construction of Batman as this guy who's broken and needs to come back, but it doesn't inspire me to think much more.
Well, I mean, I have a different problem with all of that because, you know, it's not that it inspires me to think much more. I just think that is very badly handled, you know, and with authoritarian tendencies that it seems to be unwittingly propagating. So, you know, I think those things are a mess. You know, it wants to bring up big ideas, but actually doesn't have the intelligence or even the craft to bring them all together, you know, into something that is coherent.
Maybe the lesson of the Christopher Nolan realistic Batmans is that realistic Batman is horrible and a fascist, and we should be happy with Joel Schumacher, you know, sort of shit Batman,
well,
because he doesn't make us worry.
I am a fan of the Tim Burtons, and I think they're better films than this.
I like Tim Burtons. I don't like the Joel Schumachers.
So, right, thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.